Hi there, thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to show you how to install a driver's side and passenger side swivel seat adapters in a 2018 Sprinter Worker cargo van. I just want you to keep in mind I'm not a mechanic, so if you do anything that I show you in this video, you're doing it at your own risk. So just be careful, be smart, it should work out just fine. So let's get to it. We bought these seats at sprinterstore.com, and I'll put a link directly to the product in the description below. This one here is the passenger kit. It comes with a swivel assembly, 4 mounting bolts, and a nut and a bolt to mount the seat belt to this tab here. The driver's kit is exactly the same thing, except it's a mirror image, so the seat belt tab is on the far side. And it also comes with these 2 bolts and this little adapter, which is used to lower the handbrake to make room for the seat to be able to swivel. Because I will be moving the handbrake, I'm going to have to be able to get under the vehicle afterwards to readjust it to make sure the tension is correct on the cable. So I'm going to drive onto these ramps just to give myself some more room to get under the vehicle. This Sprinter comes with both passenger side and driver's side airbags mounted inside the seat. So I'm going to have to disconnect the wires leading to those. But I don't want a spark or a static discharge or something to accidentally deploy that airbag. That would be a really bad thing. So I'm going to disconnect the battery. The Sprinter comes with a very handy little clip just to the right of the gas pedal on the driver's side. You just pop down the little red button, pull the clip, and your battery's disconnected. Then the very next thing we're going to do, again, just to be extra safe, before we unbolt the seat, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect those wires leading to the airbag. So to get to those wires, you just slide the passenger seat forward and pull this out, and here they are. So using this utility pick, I'm going to push on this tab right here, and it comes right apart. Okay, now those wires are safely out of the way, we can go ahead and start taking the seat off. First thing we do, with a straight slot screwdriver, we pop this little tab off. And then, using a T50 Torx bit, we're going to remove the seat belt. You may have to wiggle it around a little bit to get it out of there. Because there's a little tab right here that fits into a hole right behind the bolt. Then we're going to replace that bolt because that holds the back of the seat. Put the tab back on, and we're done here. Next we'll slide the seat back, and using an E14, that's an external Torx, we'll remove the bolts holding the seat down. We'll slide the seat forward and go remove the bolts on the back. And now I can remove the seat. Okay, the swivel adapter has a hole in it that it pivots on, and that's the hole that this is going to come up through. But it's not going to be right here. It's going to be over here somewhere. So I'm going to temporarily set the swivel plate on here, and I'm going to mark it on this where to cut a hole. So using a Sharpie, I'll mark the hole. Okay, so that's where I want the hole. To remove this, you just lift up. It's just a piece of foam. Nice and flexible. I'll go cut this hole and come right back. Okay, now we have a new hole. I'm going to pass this connector up through the new hole and put this back on just by pushing these tabs down under there and then under there. And now I'll bring the swivel back. And I will pass this wire up through the hole. Now it's going to be easiest to reattach the seat belt if I first turn this a bit so that I've got some room to access it here. And to attach the seat belt, we want to put this bolt going this direction, not this direction, because the bolt is long enough that once this thing is over here, it would hit the pedestal. So it's got to come through this way. Bring the seat belt down, put this tab through this little hole, and start threading it back on. So I have a 16mm wrench for the bolt, and I have an 18mm socket for the nut. Set this back where it belongs. Okay, you'll notice I have the top swiveled a bit. That's to leave access room to get these bolts back in. Now these are the bolts that came with the kit. There's 3 that are identical, and then there's one that's tapered. The tapered one goes into this hole with the taper, which you'll see when you do your own. And the other ones go in the other 3 holes. Well, this thing didn't quite fit correctly. Looks like this piece right here, you can see that, this piece right here is not positioned exactly where it needs to be. Right here you can see some of the paint is scraped away on the end. And I could see right here on the pedestal a bunch of paint scraped away. So this gap, I actually just put that gap in there using my moto tool. Cut that away a bit so that that piece on the bottom here can slide in there. And then I can just barely get these holes to line up. But I did test fit it, it did work, so I think we're good to go. First thing I need to do is spray paint this to protect the bare metal, and then I'll put this thing back on. Alright, so I'm going to try this again now that I've made that adjustment. I'm putting these 3 bolts in first. They're still very loose because I need to be able to move this. Those, by the way, go in with an 8mm hex. This one goes in with a 6mm hex. And I need to lift the whole thing up a bit to get it to line up so that I can get this in there without it being cross-threaded. Good news, I think it's working. And now I can tighten these. Okay, so that works. Now I can put the seat back on. So putting the seat back on is exactly the opposite of taking it off. So I will start with the back. These are the bolts that originally held the seat to the pedestal before I took it off. And I'm not going to tighten them all the way, but they do need to go down far enough to be out of the way to allow the seat to slide back so that I can put the front ones on. I took the seat back out because I want to cut a little bit of this panel off, just so I don't have to raise the seat quite so high to be able to swivel it. So here goes. That worked really well, but I'm going to clean this edge up with a utility knife. Okay, I'll do the same thing on the other side, and we will call it good. Okay, so I trimmed the other side, and I went ahead and reinstalled the passenger seat. Then I took the driver's seat out. It's the same procedure as doing the passenger seat, except there's also a second wire. It's for the seat belt. But I trimmed the panels on the driver's seat as well. So we are ready to install the swivel on the driver's side now. The swivel on the driver's side is a little bit more involved than the passenger side because the handbrake will get in the way of the swivel. So we need to remove the handbrake temporarily and install a little adapter to lower it down. So to start, we remove the cover by pulling out on the center part, and it'll come back like that. And then right on the other side, inside here, there's a little clip. Just pop that out, and then that covers off. The forward part of the cover can stay on, but now we're going to remove these two bolts. On this van, it uses a 16mm socket or wrench, but before we loosen those, I'm going to take the emergency brake off. Okay, now that that's off, the next step is to take this adapter and using the tapered bolts that came with it, two of these, we install the adapter right there where the emergency brake handle was, and then we're going to use the bolts that came with the emergency brake and go back through the emergency brake into these holes, and you'll see it's going to basically lower the whole assembly down about 1 inch. And so I'm using a 6mm hex key. And I have to go back and forth on this because the tolerance is so tight that I have to kind of work that thing down little by little, one side and then the other. And then the other thing is, the holes on the mounting bracket to put these bolts in, they're a little bit closer together than the holes were on this. I could not get this threaded in there. So what I had to do was drill this and go back and forth to try and make these holes a little bit wider to give some room so that these could go in without being cross-threaded. Good news is that worked. So now I'm going to connect these electric connectors back. And I'll put this in here. And it works. Okay, well, I ran into a little problem here. Because this is lower down, I had hoped that I would be able to, where this cable goes through the floor, be able to push it backwards so that it wouldn't bind into the hole through the floor. But there's a bushing that this cable goes into on a cross member of the frame, just a little bit back here, and it prevents this cable housing from going back. So I can't do a thing with that. There's no way to move it. And with this thing lower, it pushes it and binds against that hole, like I said. So I think what I need to do is cut a little bit off of this sheathing around the cable. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got a moto tool, Pair of Vise Grips to hold onto this with. Right at the end of this little Mercedes logo, that's about 1 inch right there. So that's where I need to cut this. So here goes nothing. Okay, well, that was a pretty big job. Very tough cable. That took me almost 30 minutes to cut through it because I wanted to be very careful not to cut this part. But finally got it. So now I can shove this down. That's about 1 inch lower than it was. I'm going to reattach this and let's hope this works. Okay, well, I got the cable connected again. Now I can just put this back together. Before I forget, there's a rubber boot on the cable where it goes through the floor. I think it got knocked out of position, so I'm going to go under and put it back where it belongs. Right here we have the cable coming through the floor from the handbrake that we just moved. This is the edge of the hole that it was binding on. So I cut away part of the sheathing because this could not be shoved backwards because of this bushing here. So now I just need to put this now I just need to put this boot back on. Okay, and that seems to be seated pretty well. And now I need to go adjust the tension on the brake cable. So I'm going to go under the van just forward of the rear axle here. This right here is the handbrake adjustment bracket. Because the handbrake was lowered and the cable came backwards a little ways, this is the cable. In order to take up this slack, I've loosened these two nuts and I've slid this whole assembly backwards about, maybe an inch or so. And then I've retightened these. But what that does is it loosens these as well. These go to the wheels where the brakes are. So what I need to do is pull this little assembly here forward to make up for that. So in order to do that, I'm going to loosen this lock nut, and then I'm going to tighten this adjustment nut. I'm going to screw it forward to pull that assembly that direction, and this should be right back where it was before we even started. Okay, we'll go see how that works. Okay, everything is reattached down below, so I'm going to go ahead and put the cover back on. We're almost done. I have reinstalled the driver's seat. It's the same thing as the passenger seat. It's just the reverse of taking it out of here. Let's see how it works. So first you lift up on the lever, then you kind of have to slide the seat forward, but then it'll go all the way around. And there it is. So now there's only one more thing to do. Okay, so the last thing you want to do is take your rig out to test the tension on the handbrake, make sure it's adjusted correctly. You want to find a slight incline, not too steep, but just enough so that when you put it in neutral, and you take the handbrake off, you want the van to roll. We want to make sure that there's not too much tension and that we're dragging the brakes while we're driving. And then of course, go ahead and put the brake on and make sure it holds. Other than that, we're pretty much done. So thank you so much for watching this video. You'd be doing Shannon and me a huge favor if you would click that like button below. Thanks. Have a good one. See you next time.